Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining our first webinar, which is dedicated to commercial real estate sector in the Baltics and Belarus. Indeed, it has been, I think, 6 weeks for most of us, where we find ourselves in a bit different environment and dealing with different issues. I think we have taken our lessons so far. I'm running this from my office room, and I'm happy to be here after 6 weeks, and indeed look forward to coming back here for somewhat more permanently. I hope you too. So I'm Kęstutis Adamonis. I will be assisting you, moderating the discussions. As you have seen from the invitation, there will be 12 speakers who are experts of our commercial real estate sector. And the idea of this webinar was to actually get you, the commercial real estate owners, managers, decision makers, to help you and give us kind of a snapshot of what we see, what is happening in the industry in terms of tenant-landlord relationship. We also want you to brief about what our countries and the governments are doing in respect of assisting the businesses that have been affected. And we will be focusing on you, on real estate owners and managers, to help you understand what is available or hopefully will soon be available, and also to cover the aspects of the potentially available state aid in respect of financing. So this is the objective. Please understand, we will not be going in depth. We'll be going actually on the landscape so that you can take a snapshot. You could also potentially compare how countries are dealing with the issues and what we observe. We will not be taking a crystal ball. We will not be speculating of what is waiting for us. I think, if I may, a quick comment, I believe we do see and observe that the reaction of the markets and market players have been largely different from what it has been 10 or 12 years ago. And I think those market players who tried to take kind of a checklist from the last crisis, if I may call it, have largely failed. And I specifically mention and speak about some tenants who tried to use the same technique as seems to have worked during last financial crisis. So, but quickly about some basic rules of this webinar. Unfortunately, we will not be able to see you, as you understand, but you have the questions section in the Q&A part that you can put your questions in, and we will be addressing those after the presentation. So the first hour is for us to cover the 4 countries. And then the last 30 minutes will be to address your questions. And if I may ask, please be rather not specific. Don't put your specific concerns in specific situations, but try to think of what can be relevant for most of the participants. So this is how we run it. We will be starting from north, going to south, and see how north countries are doing, which I think somehow northern countries have been able to put things in somewhat better order historically, and southern countries are usually a bit more bizarre for obvious reasons. So we'll see if that is the case in our industry. So that with that, let me start this webinar, and I will invite Paul, who will be speaking about the rent aspects and the tax aspects. So let me quickly run to the slides. Let me just a second. Here is Estonia, and Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello from sunny Tallinn. I think this time we have a bit more infections and a bit more victims of this virus than our southern neighbors. But the overall situation in Estonia is quite similar to Finland, and also the approach to dealing with has been quite similar to Finland, but not quite the same. At the moment, it looks like we have passed the peak of at least the sort of this part of the crisis. Of course, the crisis will last much longer, but now we do have already some discussion and some optimism in how we are going to open up and how we will resume business. But from the real estate sector, what is important is that in Estonia there has been no general lockdown or stay-at-home orders. So there is no rule that everybody has to stay at home. Of course, this is a recommendation. The rule is that in public spaces, this is called the 2+2 rule, that at most 2 persons can be together, and there must be a 2-meter distance to the next person. So this is the rule that we have in place. In addition, we have a lockdown of certain establishments. So there are some specific establishments that have been locked down, which cannot be open. These include, well, some are fairly obvious: gyms, spas, cinemas, etc. One of these lockdown orders concerns shopping centers, and it's the shopping centers. The term is used rather widely. It's not only what we would usually understand is a shopping center. It's actually any facility with at least 3 shops and with a common entrance. But also in the shopping centers, there are certain stores that can remain open during this period. And since the crisis hit, especially, or there were worse cases in Saaremaa and Muhu Islands, therefore there are some additional measures taken there. Now, if you look at what effect on these have on the leases, is that under Estonian law, the fact that we have this horrible pandemic is not a general force majeure. So it's not an excuse for not paying rent, and it's not also an excuse to not pay the loan payments to the bank. So the Estonian law requires that the force majeure is looked at in a very narrow way in each specific situation, whether it is or not. So there is no general right to not pay rent or right to not perform according to the agreement. The establishments that are subject to lockdown, for them there are specific statutory provisions, not exactly force majeure, but these specific provisions can allow such tenants to reduce the rent. It also depends on the agreement, but there is a legal possibility that the rent could be reduced. In addition, there is in Estonian law a provision that allows for courts to rebalance agreements if unforeseen circumstances have caused one party a particular hardship. The current court practice has been very narrow in that it has almost never been successfully applied. we will no doubt see the court cases come out of this crisis, and it's very well possible that the courts will ease on this, and also some of the leases may be adjusted under these hardship rules. But this we'll see in the future if it happens or not. With respect to taxes, the overall rule is that there is no general postponement or general waiver of taxes. The relief measures that are being applied is that if there is a tax debt, the tax need to be declared as ordinary. But if a tax is not paid, then there is no interest to be paid on those tax debts until the 1st of May. And also after the 1st of May, the interest rate to be paid on tax debts is permanently reduced. Also the tax debts, if they occur, are not made public at the moment. In Estonia, generally all tax debts, no matter how small, are immediately public, and this is something that all parties review when contemplating with whom they do business. So for now, these are not made public, but if there are tax debts, this can still be a disqualifying factor for some public procurement and certain aid measures. So there is somewhat of a relief, but it's not really a waiver or anything like that. On top of the addition, on the previous, the tax board has said that they will expedite the process of establishing payment schedules for tax debts. So if there is tax debt, it would be possible to create the payment schedule with the tax authorities. They say that they've expedited the process, and for debts up to 20,000, this will be automatically granted. There is also some sort of social tax reliefs offered for sole proprietors, but these are not really that relevant for the real estate sector. But yeah, thank you from my part. So, Kęstutis.
Thank you, Paul. I would like to invite Kathleen, who will speak about and describe shortly the financing aid that is potentially available to commercial real estate owners. Kathleen, please. Kathleen, I think you are on mute.
Hello. So hi from my side. Thank you, Kęstutis. So I will now briefly discuss the financial measures available in Estonia. Firstly, what is important to mention is that there are currently no state support measures specifically designed for the real estate owners. However, recently a proposal was made to the government by Estonian Traders Association to offer partial rent relief to retail traders. And the idea of the proposal was for the state to compensate part of the rent. So, for example, if the landlord offers a tenant a 25% discount of the rent amount, then the state would compensate also 25%, and then the remaining 50% would be paid by the tenant. This proposal, made some weeks ago already, was first rejected by the government. But now, just yesterday, the Minister of Finance said that the idea is now being reconsidered, and also came out with a memorandum to offer rent subsidies. Today, we have no certainty when or if it will be available and what are the exact conditions, but at least the idea is again back on the table and could likely offer some relief to your tenants. But now moving on to what is already available. So from the government side, the state-owned Kredex Foundation offers loan guarantees and direct so-called emergency loans. for the companies affected by COVID-19. The guarantees are available both in case of new bank loans and also existing loans, provided that the existing creditor, so the bank, relaxes payment conditions by offering at least 6 months payment leave. And the direct loans are available in case the financing cannot be obtained from the banks. So in order to apply for this, the applicant also has to submit a rejection from the bank, or then loan offer, which is really on unreasonable terms. The direct loans under current conditions are not the cheapest ones, with the yearly interest rate starting from 4 to 6%. And this is one condition that has received a lot of criticism from actually the beginning of the measure. The critics arguing that at the same time the government is borrowing money with negative interest, and the support measure should never be a source of enrichment. And currently it seems that these discussions slowly begin to bear fruit, as just recently the Minister of Finance said that the interest rate is likely to come down. Well, we shall see. Now, there are preconditions applicable to all CREDEX measures. Firstly, the measures are only offered to companies that were not in difficulties before the crisis. There are certain measurement rules for that. And also the second condition is that the companies should be sustainable and solvent in the long term. What this means is that the applicant should demonstrate a plan how to overcome the difficulties. So the idea is that the measures are available only to those who have, with a little help, reasonable chances of surviving the crisis. Now, considering the audience, there is also an exclusion for new real estate developments with the aim to sell or rent out the real estate. So this type of projects do not qualify. And also from practical side, we do appreciate that these measures may not offer relief to biggest real estate projects where the loan amounts are substantial, because as you can see from the list, the maximum amount of all CREDEX measures per group of companies is 5 million euros. However, having that said, in case of smaller assets and also for some of your tenants affected by these lockdown measures, this still might bring relief. And timeline-wise, all measures are currently available until the end of this year. So this was from the state side. From the private sector side, just to briefly mention, we know that the banks have openly stated they would apply payment holidays for the principal amount of the loans, and without changing any other conditions like increasing interest rate or demanding for additional collateral. And usually this is done with no or at least substantially lower contract amendment fees than usual. And this is what we actually see on the market widely. All bigger banks are doing it. This is all in brief from Estonia regarding financial measures. Thank you, and back to you, Kęstutis.
Catherine, thank you. Indeed, with that, we close Estonian chapter. And if you have some questions in relation to Estonia, please use the Q&A. And we are moving on to Latvia. And I would ask Victoria to cover the lease and rent part.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Kęstutis. My name is Victoria, and I represent the real estate and construction team of Latvian Sorainen office. I will open up the Latvian part of the presentation by introducing you with regulation which applies to lease payments in times of COVID-related circumstances in Latvia. Namely, my task for today is to give a simple 4-steps plan to analyze whether the tenant's request to be fully or partly free from the lease payment is legally grounded or it's purely landlord's business decision to agree on any decrease at all. To start with, the first is the analysis of the provisions of law. Namely, Article 2147 clearly states that the tenant is fully or partly free from the lease payments if the leased property has not been used due to the event not caused by the tenant or because of his fault. The same articles of the civil law says also specific clarifying situations of this, namely a situation where the tenant is unable to use the property because of the force majeure, the situation where the use of most of parts of the property becomes restricted, or a situation when the lessee loses the fruits fully or at least to a considerable extent due to a force majeure. This last example is the one where law specifically says that this is applicable to the land lease, but we consider that in some cases there still might be arguments to apply it also to other leases. So the basic principle, what you can see from this provision of law, is that the cases when property cannot be used because of the described circumstances, then lessee is free, fully or partly, dependent on the situation, of rent payments. There are some additional conditions and details which can be found in Articles 2148 of the same civil law, which also should be looked up for correct conclusions. So to sum up, the most common question of this is whether the tenant can be free of lease payments because of force majeure, and what are the examples of such force majeure. So let's go in detail of what regulation says in Latvia about this force majeure. So Latvian law does not have a specific definition of it, but case law and doctrine considers that event of a force majeure is if there are met following 4 criteria. You can see them on the slides and I will not read them in detail, but I want to stress out that you pay attention to the last one because it's one of the most important. And it's important to say that when you analyze the mentioned circumstances, they should be analyzed only from position of performance of obligation of the respective agreement by respective tenant. To make it simple, circumstances which can be considered as force majeure and releasing a party from the lease payment may not be a force majeure releasing from obligations in the loan agreement. So it's case-to-case review. To simplify and speak about examples, a state decision to close a shopping center for the weekend can be considered as event which includes all the 4 described circumstances. Also, a prohibition of work of some entertainment centers is considered to be a force majeure. However, a business decision of a coffee shop owner, for example, to close his shop to keep his employees safe during the pandemic, will not be considered as a clear force majeure for the exempt from the lease payments. The third step that you have to look into is the lease agreement. Namely, does it say anything about similar cases? Is there a definition of force majeure? Is it silent about lease amendments in such case? Maybe the agreement includes a provision the tenant assumes all the risk, and then there is no use of applying the law because of the provisions of the agreement. So in any case, this should be reviewed and analyzed in detail. A short word to say about the utility costs. All these regulations in law speaks only about the lease payments. Therefore, utility costs remains as it is agreed in the lease agreement. As the 4th step, I would like to mention that there are some state aid measures applicable to the leases, but unfortunately the ones which are available in Latvia now applies only to specific parties of the lease agreement. Namely, exempt from the lease payments or lease reductions are available if the lessor is a public party and the lessee is a merchant of the sectors affected by the crisis. So to sum it all up, you have to start with understanding whether the law provisions can be applied, is your case a force majeure, and what the agreement says for the similar situation.
Good, Victoria, thank you. We go to Yanis, our tax partner. Yanis, please, floor is yours.
Thanks, Kostas. Hello, clients and friends. Greetings from Riga. I have prepared a couple of slides for you regarding taxation.
Of your particular case.
Sorry, Yanis, we have some disruption. I think Victoria is still online.
Yes, sorry.
Sorry, Victoria. Please continue.
Seems that there's something with the connection. So
yes,
to sum up, you have to start with understanding whether the law provisions can be applied. Is a particular case of force majeure from the tenant's perspective? What the agreement says in your situation? And it's important to mention that this description that I made is just a first general analysis and may not be clearly applied to all the situation in detail. So I have only 5 minutes to describe the most important, and you know the devil is in the details. So I understand your wish to hear more examples and more clear solutions, and we will be happy to assist you with this analysis for your particular case. And if you feel that this assistance is required, we are welcome. And as a final remark, I want to say that irrespective of all that has been written for similar situations, if the parties will find a way of cooperation, it will allow us to return to former life with less losses, and smaller business will have an option to survive the crisis. Thank you all, and back to Kęstutis.
Indeed, thanks Victoria so much, and Yanis, please, tax part.
Yes, hello once again. Sorry for the hiccup. I feel a little bit like in this Eurovision Song Contest that there cannot be no hiccups in the live stream. So apologies for that. But yeah, regarding the taxations part in Latvia, I have prepared 2 slides for you. In the first slide, I have selected top 5 most relevant topics for you guys in the from the legislation point of view, and in the second slide I will speak a little bit about the top 5 topics also most relevant to you from the practical side. So on the legislation side, I think you are mostly familiar with all these topics because these have been in the central stage for a while, and first 2 topics I think are most relevant, that the provisions allow you to defer tax payments up to 3 years with no interest applied. There's a specific procedure how to apply for this in the electronic declaration system, and this applies to 2 categories of clients who have suffered from COVID-19 and because of that has seen a drop of revenues, either 20% with preconditions or 30% with no preconditions. And regarding the comparables, there is a slight change that happened yesterday. Actually, it was adopted in the provisions of government regulations that the comparables of revenues for this revenue drop has been changed. They are applied not to March and April of the last year, but this year's March and April is compared to average income of month when the company has worked. And in the practical session, I will explain practical situation why this was important. And the same 2 preconditions go to also the idle worker compensation that can be up to 700 euros for each employee that is not working for the company right now. And the third possibility of easement in the tax sector is real estate tax. You can, as a company, you can apply for deferral of the tax payment to your local municipality, and the municipality can grant this deferral. There has been a practical question regarding this particular deferral that some municipalities have said, okay, we will grant you the deferral, but there will be interest applied to this deferral of the tax. That, in my view, does not go correctly with the wording of the law, because the law says that the municipality can grant a new term of payment, not the extension of the old payment, and therefore there is a good chance to argue that this interest should not be applied, as in the case of deferral of the general tax payments in the first point above. There is a special provision saying that VAT should be refunded within 30 days in all cases, but that practically has not been an issue for larger companies, because the same provisions were applied also for larger companies, also having at least 5,000 input VAT surplus. And the last is what I want to mention is that state aid provisions limit those tax benefits up to 800,000 euros. So these benefits cannot exceed this amount in any case. In some industries that could be even lower than that. Then if we switch to the next slide, I would mention that this provision about the comparables of turnover in March and April this year to March and April last year was important for several hotel owners that had hotels under construction, and they had no turnover in March and April last year, and to a large extent, thanks to our lobbying efforts, within 3 to 4 days, we managed to lobby provisions in the law saying that now this provision applies to average income in the those months when the company was actually working in 2019. The other provision important in this case could be that OECD guidelines also refer to construction sites where it is now clear that because of COVID-19, the provisions in the tax treaties about how long the construction sites can last without creating a permanent establishment risk are not affected by COVID-19 situation, where construction sites are closed and construction employees are going back home and not working for the construction site. And then the last provisions, I think, when give examples that if rent is not requested, we suggest to treat it as a discount, and then there is a good chance to treat this as that input VAT for this provision of these rental services is fully deductible. Cancelled events and trips because of virus are also deductible business expenses. And the last but not least is that electronic waybills without paper form waybills, also CMRs in electronic version are also possible, and very topical issue for many companies nowadays. Thank you. Kestas, back to you.
Thank you, Jānis. So the last one is financing part, and Agneta from our finance and insurance team, please. The floor is yours.
Hi.
Switching the slides.
Yes. So some of what I will mention will a little bit resemble the situation with financing aid in Estonia. So likewise, in Latvia, most of the banks have announced that they would be able to grant a deferral of principal upon the client's request. So this is not real estate specific. This applies to all bank clients. So as a first measure, in case of financial difficulty, you should turn to your financing partner. However, if that is not sufficient, there is also state aid from the State Development Finance Institution Altum possible. However, to start with, it's important to note that real estate business is somewhat discriminated in this area because different types of real estate businesses are actually excluded from benefiting of these programs. So excluded types of businesses involve the sale of purchase of one's own real property, also intermediation in relation to real estate, or development of residential buildings. However, other types of real estate business, such as renting or management of real estate, is not excluded, so those types of businesses could apply to either the loans or the guarantees. So probably the question would be, what happens to those businesses who both, let's say, sell real property that they own, and at the same time they're also renting or managing real estate, so the excluded and non-excluded types of businesses. In general, it's still possible to apply to this aid, but it's just you would have to be able to separate these both operations so that the financing only goes to the supported business types. Also note that these loan guarantees and loans, like Katlin mentioned in Estonia, also in Latvia, they are meant like a measure of last resort. So most likely Altum would only be able to grant that in case you were unsuccessful in getting the financing elsewhere, let's say from your own bank or else. So to go into a bit more detail separately for the loan guarantees, this is like the default measure to apply to. So before asking for a state issued loan, you should try to get a loan guarantee, and this works in the way that you apply to your own credit institution to either ask an extension of existing loan or a new loan, and as an additional guarantee, Altum would be able to guarantee your obligations. However, we have to consider, as you can see from the table, that the amount of this loan guarantee is relatively low. It's just 5 million euro max per company, and to be specific, it's actually not just per company, but per group of companies. And also there are other types of limits. So probably for large or medium enterprises, this is not going to be a lot of help, and this also explains why so far about 77% of already granted aid in types of guarantees or loans has been to micro or small businesses actually. And when we're talking about the loans here, the maximum amount is just 1 million, again for a group of companies, and also there are other financial limits that apply. So it cannot exceed the 25% of turnover in 2019, and there are other types of limits as well. So yes, probably not so useful for larger companies. And it's also quite important to note that to be eligible for this type of financial aid, there have to be several criteria met. They are quite detailed, so I will not be able to cover them all. But most importantly, the business must be affected by COVID-19. However, prior to COVID-19, it should have been financially sound, so no tax debts, no other types of non-performing loans, and also it should be financially viable if it gets this financial aid. So that is in a very brief overview. Just maybe a couple of last things to mention is that this aid is available until the end of this year, unless something is changed. And some companies a lot of companies have already applied, and there are press statements by these companies, and we have also heard from our clients who are bigger companies that it's quite difficult to qualify for this aid. So it's just something to consider. And that would be all. So for more detailed information, I will be happy to respond to your questions in the Q&A session. Thank you.
Indeed, Magneta, thanks. Please put your questions to Q&A part of this webinar. And with that, we're closing Latvian chapter and moving on to Lithuania. The first one to address rent and lease matters is Karolis. Karoli, please.
Hi, everyone. So, as you know, the government regulation number 207 on establishing quarantine measures created large disturbances in the Lithuanian lease market. It also raised a lot of questions regarding payment obligations of tenants under concluded lease agreements. And the first one of these is the question whether the established restrictions form force majeure circumstances for payment obligations of tenants under concluded leases. So, in our view, it is highly unlikely that force majeure provisions would be applicable to the landlord-tenant relationship. This is because COVID-19 is in itself not a force majeure circumstance. The force majeure circumstances are the government response measures established in this regulation. And performance of payment obligations under lease agreements has not been prohibited. Also, no other restrictions have been imposed on lease relations. Thus, we do not think force majeure qualification is likely. Now we can turn to hardship. And contrary to force majeure, we do believe that tenants may be entitled to claim application of the hardship provisions that are established in our civil code. The civil code allows a party to a contract to request amendment of the contract performance when its performance becomes significantly more difficult for this party. The actual relief that can be granted under hardship rules is not regulated in our civil code. It is left for the parties or the court to determine such measures. So we do believe that the hardship rules can be invoked by at least some tenants, and this definitely includes those tenants whose activities were directly prohibited or restricted by government regulation number 207. We do, however, want to stress a few points which can quite often be overlooked. So the first of these is that our civil code and practice of the courts clearly establish that the hardship provisions do not provide unilateral rights to tenants. What this means is that presenting a request to apply hardship does not grant rights to withhold or reduce payments to the tenant just because a request has been presented. Until and if the parties reach an agreement, the tenant is obliged to perform the agreement fully. So in practice, we often see the tenants behave differently, and we believe that this may negatively impact their position in case a disagreement does reach a court. The second point that we would like to raise in relation to hardship is that, while we are happy to see that the quarantine measures are being lifted in Lithuania, more and more tenants are returning to their premises and, business is restarting. While this definitely limits the impact of quarantine measures on tenants, we think that reopening will not completely remove the risk that tenants can claim application of the hardship rules. We believe that there is potential for the negative effects on the economy caused due to the imposed quarantine measures to last longer than the quarantine itself, and as a consequence, such negative effects could potentially be grounds for applying hardship provisions even after the quarantine measures are fully lifted. If court practice from the previous economic crisis is a guide, such a risk is real, and if market rents drop significantly in comparison to the rents set in existing lease agreements, tenants could have an option to claim for modification based on hardship rules. Taking a step back from those statutory force majeure provisions and hardship rules, the first thing that you actually need to do in this situation is to look at the lease agreement, because it is quite common to find rules describing tenants' rights to be released from payments due to their inability to use the premises in lease agreements. We do believe that such rules could be applicable in the current situation, and that definitely needs to be checked. In practice, in the market, we do see that landlords take different positions regarding rent rebates, rent deferrals. It greatly depends on the industry, so there's nothing too much that we could generalize on this part. To quickly turn to the proposed state aid model then. Contrary to the other countries, Lithuania actually has adopted principles for a subsidy of rental fees. It is still a policy decision, so no specific legislation has been formed to our knowledge, and that is pending. But on 15 April, the government approved the following main principles of the subsidy. So the total amount of the subsidy will be up to 100 million euros. The government would provide support equal to 50% of the monthly rent, on the condition that landlords also provide a discount of at least 30% of the monthly rent. The subsidy will be granted to tenants whose activities were directly prohibited by the government resolution number 207, and the duration of the subsidy shall be for the duration of the quarantine period plus 2 more months. To our knowledge, our government has provided the state aid scheme to the European Commission for approval, and while we do not know if this is the exact scheme that has been presented, we hope to receive some news on this one early next week. So that's my part. Thanks for the attention, and back to Kęstutis.
Thanks, Karoli. Indeed. Let's proceed to tax, and Saule, our tax partner, is next. Saule, please. Turning on the slides.
Thank you, Kęstutis, and hi to all. Well, as already described by Latvia and Estonia, Lithuania has also measures to, first of all, most of the measures that have been introduced from the point of taxation in Lithuania, they are directed towards postponement of tax payments. The rules currently in place are tightly related to the period of quarantine. So the deferral of taxes is currently clear for the period until end of quarantine and sometime afterwards, and is tightly related to whether activities of a company or private individuals engaged in economic activity are considered to be those mostly influenced by the pandemic. There are 2 types of relief schemes that are currently applied. The businesses that are on the list of those who are mostly hit by COVID-19, and we have a list of, I think, around 50,000 companies and individuals who are considered to be mostly hit by that. They don't have to submit any declarations. They don't have to make any tax payments. Everything is postponed for them without any interest or default interest. The businesses that are not on the list, and as a rule, real estate owning companies are not considered to be immediately hit by COVID-19. They have an option to apply to the tax authorities asking for deferral of their tax liabilities. And but those companies, they have to substantiate why the tax deferrals for them is important, and that is usually done by showing the financials and explaining how the pandemic influenced the financials of the company. What is important that taxes we have one-stop shop. So this deferral rule applies to all the taxes, so you don't have to apply to different institutions simultaneously. The rule is the following: that everything is decided until the end of quarantine, and once the quarantine ends, the companies that are in the list of those mostly influenced have 2 months to either make pay the taxes, the due taxes, or apply to the tax for a tax loan. It is not yet clear of how long the tax loans will be available, or whether there will be a general rule, or whether there will be a very simplified procedures for the application. I would expect that we will have a simplified procedures because, well, basically tax authorities will receive one day 50,000 applications for tax for tax loans. So there will be there will be some procedural simplifications, I would expect. Now, when it comes to real estate specific tax measures during the crisis, there have been several municipalities. Kasas, could you go forward a little bit? 2 slides forward, please.
I think I'm on this one.
Yeah, true. Thank you. We have currently 4 municipalities, including Vilnius municipality, that have made a decision to relief from real estate land and state land lease tax. Businesses mostly hit by COVID-19. There are other 3 smaller municipalities who have similar measures in place, and currently the practicalities of how this applies is still unknown, because, for example, Vilnius municipality decision states that there is no need to apply for this specific relief from real estate and land tax. However, since the application mechanism, for example, real estate tax is declared, or is companies receive declaration on real estate tax from the tax authorities, it is not clear yet how this procedure will work in practice, but we have to see this somewhere towards the end of the year. What is also important, that all the municipalities that have made this decision to relieve certain businesses from real estate land tax, they have made one exclusion, saying that if the rent lease payment includes said taxes, and landowner or real estate owner receives the taxes from the tenant, then the incentive does not apply. So it is potentially to be looked into the contracts of specific lease payments, and to be analyzed whether and how in concrete situations this relief should apply. But again, this highly depends on how the municipalities will implement it. We have been in contact with them. There are some questions that they have no answers themselves, but hopefully, at least for the businesses mostly influenced by COVID-19, there will be at least those reliefs. Thank you. Kastas, back to you.
Good. Many thanks, Saule. You will be able to see some further slides on Lithuanian tax part. And just please note that after this webinar, you will be receiving an email from us with a link to the video recording. So you will be able to go back and listen to and see the slides and the presentation part that is of your interest. So with that, we go to Lithuanian financing part, and I ask Agne. Agne, please take the floor.
Hi, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, all is good.
Okay, very good. Hi to everybody in the region. So I'm here to cover financing relief available in Lithuania. Like in Estonia and in Latvia, there is nothing specifically aimed at the real estate sector, and to the contrary, some measures are actually not available to companies operating in the real estate. The financing aid in general is only available to those companies that are facing financial difficulties due to COVID-19, but not due to other reasons. And there is both private and state aid available. The breaking news of the day is that today the banks, well, major credit institutions in Lithuania announced a moratorium. And basically, they will provide a holiday for the repayment of the principal of the loans till the 1st of July this year. No other changes will be made in the agreements. However, all other periodic payments, such as interest, will be due as usual. Again, it will not be available to everybody. It will be only available to companies that are facing difficulties due to COVID-19. It doesn't apply automatically, so you have to apply to your bank to get it. And it only applies to loans up to 5 million euros. So the bigger players will not get this relief. As for the government aid, it is also directed mostly to the small and medium enterprises. However, some of the relief measures are also available to large entities. So to start with these, there are so-called portfolio guarantees that will be available to the financing institutions. So basically, the financial institution can include your loan into that portfolio, and the state in this way would guarantee up to 80% of that loan. However, among other conditions, it's only available to loans up to 5 million euros. And there is a restriction for real estate sector. So this measure cannot be applied to loans that were used for the acquisition of residential real estate or for investments made into such residential real estate. However, no other restrictions apply and is generally available for other companies. There is another measure, so-called individual guarantees, that currently, up to the end of this year, is also available to entities operating in the real estate sector. It also covers up to 80% of the loan, so the borrower would have to find other collateral from its own assets if needed. It applies to smaller loans only, and the maximum amount is 1.5 million euros. Another planned measure specifically aimed at larger entities is the COVID-19 fund that the government is planning to establish and put 100 million euros into it. So its aim is to provide liquidity through other means like bonds and equity. However, there's no details available about it, and we're still hoping, nevertheless, that it's going to come sooner than later. As for aid to SMEs, there's a measure, so-called interest vacation. So basically, the state government, the state agency in Vega can provide compensation up to 100% for the interest up to 6 months. If the principal of the loan was, the repayment for the principal of the loan was deferred, the maximum is 7% of annual interest and up to 200,000 euros. However, again, there is a catch for real estate sector. It is available only for loans that are used to construct or acquire commercial real estate that will be used in the company's activities. That is, if you use the loan to construct or acquire real estate that you will later transfer to their entities, it doesn't apply to you. It also does not apply to for loans used for residential real estate. There's also a measure called ASAP loans, and it's currently available loans of up to 100,000 euros, and it's supposed to be increased to up to 500,000 euros. And it's basically available to companies whose debtors are included in that tax list mentioned by Saule that are mostly affected by COVID-19 pandemic. And so basically entities can apply for these loans and get the benefit from Invega. Then there are also loans available to those entities that are mostly affected by COVID-19 themselves. Currently, those loans are up to 100,000 euros, but we hear from the Prime Minister they plan to increase it up to 1 million euros. Again, these loans have a restriction regarding real estate. They will not be available for the acquisition of residential real estate or for any improvements to the residential real estate. And there are other measures that are that are available through other financing participants, that is alternative loans that will just be provided through different intermediaries, or so-called Raspberry loans that will be available on crowdfunding platforms. So most of the measures are sort of finished, but not all of them are working yet. For some of the measures, the government hasn't signed the agreements with the financial institutions yet. And like in Latvia, we hear from the market that it's rather difficult to get the financing, or just the process of getting through the application is rather bureaucratic. But we all are hopeful that it will get easier, and Vega is working on this. And I guess what the biggest relief can be, an easier relief that can be available now, is through the private banks. That's it for me. Kęstas, back to you.
Thanks, Agne. Good. So with that, we've traveled about 600 kilometers from Tallinn through Riga to Vilnius. And let's take the last leap, about 170 kilometers to Minsk, where our Minsk colleagues will brief about what is happening in Belarus. The first is Olga. Olga, please.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So first of all, it is worth to mention that unlike in other countries, in general, no restrictive measures have been introduced so far by the government with respect to almost any business operations in Belarus. At the same time, state is developing the state aid package. However, from what we see so far from the mass media, that most probably there are going to be measures of indirect character, as application of the direct financial support is impossible due to financial budget restrictions. Secondly, that most probably such state aid measures will cover only the most suffering sectors, such as tourism, transportation, HoReCa. And thirdly, there are also possibility that the state aid will focus on state-owned companies rather than on private business. However, this is arguable and we are not sure about it. With respect to list specific issues, in the COVID times, unless the lease agreement contains any specific provisions granting the tenants right to rebate, we don't see any strong legal background or basis for tenants to ask for rebate. Force majeure will almost certainly will not be applicable in this case. Hardship, we have pretty similar regulations on hardship as in Lithuania. It might be the case, however, it still should be decided on case-by-case basis, and even with hardship, with claiming the hardship, there are no one-size-fits-all solution. So at the moment in practice, tenants and landlords, they are going through purely negotiations with respect to any kind of rent rebates or reliefs. In practice, some parties actively cooperate and reach mutually beneficial agreements. Some do not. So what to do if tenants ask for a rebate and you as a landlord is ready to negotiate one? So we recommend to check first the financial state of the tenant, and second to check the history of fulfilling obligations in the past by such tenant. So this can help to ensure that any rent rebates or deferrals will be granted only to the tenants who actually need them, and second, they will only be applicable to the tenants with which you actually want to continue work in the future. Some state aid is also planned for the tenants and landlords. However, it will be very limited. It will be applicable only to the lease of state-owned properties. It will also be applicable only to the tenants which are from the most suffering sectors, as I mentioned before. It will be in the form of moratorium on increase of the base rent unit. Base rent unit is basically a specific amount set by law, which is integral part of the state-owned property rent amount. Plus, at the same time, the state aid program is planning to provide a deferral of the rent payments until 30 September 2020, and also with respect to such deferred payments, they could be paid by installments until 31st December 2020. There are also some tax deferrals are planned. However, about them, my colleague my colleague will cover in another part. Thank you so much. That's it from my side. Kęstutis.
Yes, Olga, thanks a lot to you. And Alexei is next one. Please, Alexei.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Kęstutis, and thank you for introduction. Now I will underline key tax trends we have in Belarus now in these COVID times. And as Olga said, there are no specific tax measures that are now enacted by the government, but there are plans to have them. Currently, the presidential administration is discussing a draft of presidential edict, which will be aimed at support of economy in these times, and it is expected that this edict inter alia will cover some real estate tax matters. Namely, it will provide for a deferral of real estate tax, land tax, and land lease tax payments. The latter relates to land lease payments with respect of the land owned by the state by the 30th of September this year. But bad news that currently from the public sources we know that most likely this measure will apply only to the business which was hit by the virus significantly, like hotels, like restaurants, and etc. So this should not affect all types of business. We'll see. And the second condition for application of this benefit is that respective landlords should provide deferrals to the tenants. If the landlords will not provide deferrals to the tenants in respect of lease and rent payments, it is expected that this benefit will not apply. Another thing which goes from the pure practice standpoint is a right to deduct expenses which company has in respect of buying sanitizers, medical masks, and gloves. Firstly, it was a discussion whether they're deductible, but now it's a kind of consensus of key stakeholders that companies can deduct them. Then there is also a very interesting specific decision of the Belarusian government. It is already enacted. It allows not to accrue amortization on fixed assets during 2020. So normally it's not useful from the purely tax standpoint because amortization positively affects corporate income tax and real estate tax, decreasing the tax payable. But there is one interesting situation when it can be useful. It relates to foreign companies having real estate in Belarus and planning to sell it. Such capital gain from the sale is subject to 15% Belarusian withholding tax, and amortization in this specific situation is increasing the tax base, and therefore in this specific situation it's worth to use to apply this benefit and to decrease the tax base. Another consideration is that this decision not to accrue amortization on fixed assets may be useful for companies planning to attract some loan financing from the banks, because it increases profitability and make the company more attractive for crediting. And another trend we see now is that tax authorities becomes more aggressive now during tax audits and during normal desk health checks, and therefore it's quite important to double check that all real estate is accounted properly, because proper accounting very significantly affects relating tax outcomes. So normally the completed real estate can be accounted in 3 ways: as fixed assets, when there are some plans to use real estate for production activity, for example, if it's a shop or something, or for example, if it's a company running rent business and using all real estate for rent business. In this type of business, this can be accounted as fixed assets, which is normally the most beneficial way for tax, from tax perspective, because firstly, it allows to decrease tax base for amortization, as I described, and secondly, because input VAT amount from purchase of such real estate can be then in a year after refunded from the budget, which is a unique benefit in Belarus, because normally input VAT is not easy to get back from the budget. And there is the second way, when there are plans to use real estate as investment assets. For example, the company is doing a manufacturing and has one building or premises used to be rented out to tenants. And in this regard, this real estate should not be accounted as fixed assets and should be accounted as investment property, which means that there is no right to refund VAT on purchase of such real estate. And there is no right to apply investment deduction. It's very important. But still, amortization is calculated on such real estate. And last way to account real estate, if the company already knows that it plans to get rid, sell, or realize otherwise the real estate before than a year from the accounting date. So in this case, there is no right to accrue amortization. There is no right to refund VAT from the budget unless liquidation. And in this type of arrangement, there is no right for investment deduction. So it's quite important that real estate is accounted properly and taxes are paid in the same way. So to sum up, if taxes are not paid, it's not possible to do transactions with real estate. So state authorities simply do not register them. So please pay attention to these accounting matters as well. So thank you so much. And now it's time to finance team in Belarus to give more background about financial matters.
Indeed, thanks, Alexei, for that and for your prudent advice. The last part, financing in Belarus, but before that, I just remind the audience, we will still be having some 15 minutes or so to address your questions. We have only, I think, one question. I think we will be having time for 1 or 2 more. So please think and use this time to put questions to the Q&A part. So financing aid in Belarus, and Artem, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, I don't have many things to say about financial aid from state to business generally and to REC sector in particular, because up to the moment, no direct financial support measures have been announced by the Belarusian government. Moreover, as we may see from open sources, from mass media, it seems that, at least from Belarusian president's perspective, non-conditional financial aid will be provided to businesses if these businesses have or should have any resources to get through this crisis on their own. At the same time, as my colleagues already mentioned, there are some measures being considered by the government. Namely, there are at least 2 packages of measures that are being discussed both in business associations and in the government at the moment. And it was already announced that one of these packages will be related to, for example, construction sector. However, as of today, we are lacking any details about these packages and may not be sure whether any measures will be adopted at all, and if they will, what these measures will be. What we already have in Belarus, these are some measures adopted by the National Bank of Belarus, providing for some relief of prudential control over commercial banks. Respective decisions were made by the National Bank twice in the past 2 months, firstly on the 25th of March and then on the 22nd of April. I will not go too much into details about these reliefs of prudential control. What may be useful to know about that in theory, due to these prudential reliefs, the Belarusian banks should now become more flexible to agree to repayment holidays under the existing debts, both for small and medium enterprises and to large companies. So maybe now potentially it's the right time to start negotiations with creditor banks about the repayment holidays or other measures to soften the existing loan agreements in the light of this COVID situation. And the last thing I have to say about financial aid in Belarus is that, like many other governments of other countries, Belarus has applied to several international financial institutions with requests for different kinds of financial support measures. And as an example, there was a request from Belarusian government addressed to the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development to provide 1 billion euro loan, which proceeds of this loan to be on lent to Belarusian businesses. And potentially this may be applicable both to large companies and small and medium enterprises. So it may be useful to be aware of the news in this field and to monitor offers from Belarusian banks, because any day any useful useful news may appear. And actually that's all I have to say about Belarusian part. If you have any questions, please address them in the questions and answers section.
Very good. Thanks, Artem. With that, we concluded the presentation part, and let's see what questions we have from our audience online. We have one question, which is to all our finance team members online. So I'll read it out. If a bank gives a free COVID-19 grace period on the loan principal with no strings attached, do banks still make a mark on this in an interbank creditor history register that can hit the company's credit profile in the future? Who would like to start? Maybe same order, Estonia first.
Yes. For Estonia, the credit register of the banks reflects information on delayed payments. So in case payment deferral is agreed before any default occurs, then the answer would be no. There will be no payment remark regarding this specific borrower.
Katlin, thanks. Agneta, what do you think? How would Latvian banks record that?
Hi. So in Latvia, the situation is a bit different. This particular thing would be recorded in the credit register. However, there shouldn't be much worry that this would negatively affect the credit rating of the borrower. because as Latvian Finance Association, of which includes all of the Latvian banks, have announced at the moment these types of deferrals are actually marked with a special COVID-19 mark. So everybody understands that these deferrals are for a special occasion, so this wouldn't affect the credit rating negatively in the future.
Good, Agneta, thanks to you. Agne, what do you think? What about Lithuania?
I would say that in the long run, it definitely should not affect the credit rating of any particular company. I don't know specifically if that's going to be marked in the systems or not as COVID related. But again, for as long as you don't default and you agree on these deferrals in advance, it's not going to be a default. So you will not be breaching your agreement. And definitely in the long run, either if it's marked as a COVID-related deferral, it should not affect your credit history.
Okay, Agne, thanks. Artem, do you have a view of how would Belarus commercial banks treat such an event? Do you have an interbank credit kind of register as such, if I may ask?
Yes, of course. We do have this register, and I believe that situation did not change in comparison to before crisis state. So the rule in Belarus is that different types of information are recorded in this register, including the terms of the loan agreements. But I don't think that given that any reliefs in respect to loans will be made in good order, will be agreed in good order with banks, these reliefs or any prolongations will not be marked as default in this register. So potentially banks will see that there were some rescheduling of loan repayment, but this also should not negatively affect the general credit history of particular borrower.
Okay, Artem, understood. Thank you. That was the only question on the Q&A. However, as we still have some, I think, 8 minutes, let me please take one question from the registration list from you, the participants. This one is about the lease part. So the question is, which industries legally can say that they cannot use their space based on force majeure? Paul, would you mind addressing that? Paul, can you hear us?
Yes, sure.
Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, this goes back to the lockdown order. So we have specific establishments that are closed, for instance, cinemas, concert halls, spas, gyms, and also in the shopping centers, basically all the shops other than the grocery stores and pharmacies. Mm-hmm. And these that are subject to the lockdown order could be able to well, I mean, the discussion over whether it would be force majeure or not is sort of very complicated, but it has bearing on this. But more importantly, there is a specific provision in Estonian law that says that if tenant cannot use the premises for reasons that are not up to the tenant, then the tenant would have right to certain remedies, including the right to demand the reduce of rent.
Okay, but would you say that those businesses like cinemas, for example, in Estonia, where when they were banned, that actually legally means that they were forbidden to use the premises?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, but the sort of with respect to the force majeure argument, it actually goes so that since the government has banned the use of the premises for that purpose, and if premises were leased for that purpose, then actually it is the landlord who cannot offer the premises for that purpose. So it's a bit trickier how it works from the legal side. But with those, I mean, the bottom line is with those, there is an argument that can be made under law that there is a right to reduce rent.
Okay, very good. Now, Victoria, do you have a view on that from Latvian perspective?
Well, basically, it looks very similar to Estonia, that in respect to those industries which are particularly mentioned by state decisions, like close of shopping centers for the weekend, can be one of those. Closing of some entertainment parks like cinemas can be one of those. But as Paul correctly mentioned, it should be reviewed on case-to-case basis, whether there is something in the agreement which says vice versa, that the tenant has taken all the risk and he cannot request any decrease of the rent.
Okay, understood. Karoli, do you have a view from Lithuanian perspective, please?
I would agree with what Paul and Victoria said. Our regulation that the government has adopted, it does not prohibit the tenants from using the premises. It prohibits them from carrying out their activities. So this distinction should be made, and it needs to be seen if, for example, how it is regulated in the lease agreement, this inability to use the premises for specific activities, how it is described, but not just how it is established in the government regulation.
Indeed, I think we concluded in our team that those COVID-19 related restrictions and the quarantine measures imposed on the cinemas, the bars, the sport, the gyms, and similar, I mean, they cannot be qualified directly as a force majeure circumstance that can have a direct influence on the rent payment, right? If we focus on the rent, I mean, but we do see sometimes leases where the parties have agreed that if for some reasons which are beyond the tenant's control, the tenant cannot use the premises, and I think in the shopping center situation in Lithuania, let's take a gym, I think that would be the case, right? Then the tenant is released from the rent payment obligations. But those are purely commercial, private, contractual agreements that we have been observing in some of the shopping centers. So I think we still have a minute, and I will voice, I think, the last question. I'm not sure who is best to address, but this is from the financing. Maybe Agne, you could see. Can you please share the practice of actually receiving the state aid? I doubt that will apply to the real estate industry, though. But Agne, maybe you have some examples from the other industries. So in a number of cases, the actual aid was not granted with failure to provide arguments of such refusal. What should be done in such cases?
Yeah, as I mentioned, unfortunately, the system wasn't working well, but as I understand from the numbers provided by Invega, some money is actually being paid out already, meaning that some companies are managing. I understand that Invega is working on this very hard. They're now trying to simplify the criteria of the procedures, etc. it's just they made it a little bit bureaucratic maybe in the beginning, and some of the requirements were there. Maybe the procedure was not clear enough for everybody to really understand. And yeah, I guess they were not anticipating it, and maybe they don't have enough resources to process all the applications at the right time. But as I understood, the situation is getting a little bit better, and finally some of the money is reaching the companies. But yeah, well, unfortunately, they were not very well prepared, as probably many of the companies were not also.
Right. I'm sorry, we don't have time to go through Latvia, Estonia on that, but please excuse me for not taking the force majeure question onto my favorite country, which is Belarus. Olga, if you may, would you please say us whether a ban, but you didn't have any ban, I believe.
Yes.
But, right, so there was no ban, so we probably should not be talking about any force majeure as such, right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. No ban to any business activities or even like any kind of public lockdown. So quarantines have been introduced yet, and we are not see it coming in the nearest future, to be honestly saying, if something significantly changed in the course of coronavirus statistics or whatever. So we don't see it coming. And yes, you're absolutely right that in Belarus, force majeure, unless there are some really extreme provisions in the contracts, force majeure will most certainly will not be applicable here. The hardship, yes, there is a chance of applying hardship in certain specific circumstances. However, there is also, like, I would say, very little chances of actually this reliance on hardship working in the real life. Thank you.
Very good, Olga. Thanks indeed. And with that, I would like to thank you for those present, registered, and active. Unfortunately, we were not able to see your eyes and smiles or faces and your emotions, but I do hope this was useful to you, so that this landscape that we tried to draw during this hour and a half will be of value to you. And to conclude, differently than in some other life situations, I think that the best order is in the most southern country that we covered, but still there is a good order in some northern countries. Lithuania this time stands out somehow to be a very restrictive COVID-19 country, and I do hope that we will soon be relaxing and see you over the the glass of beer or wine or some other refreshing drinks. So enjoy the weekend, and you will be getting the link to the video recording of this webinar. And last but not least, if you have some specific COVID-19 related matters, Sorainen basically from day one has put the COVID-19 response team, COVID-19 task force. You can find the contacts and the advices we've been able to produce so far in our website. So thanks again, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.